Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. For the first time since the Russian invasion, Moscow claims to have used an AI-powered anti-air defense system to shoot down a Ukrainian aircraft. What this means is that there was no human involvement in tracking, detecting and shooting down the air target. For the Ukrainians who've launched their counteroffensive, this cannot be good news. The best of the NATO weapons are being tested out on the battlefields of Ukraine. And although the West is not willing to admit it yet, little by little, with each passing month, NATO's involvement in this war in terms of training, weapon supplies and intelligence sharing is increasing, even though the NATO troops are not directly involved yet. American General Mark Milley's assessment of the Ukrainian counteroffensive could not have been more honest. He's admitted that the counteroffensive is going to be a very difficult fight that will take considerable time. But what no one knows is how all of this violence and bloodshed will end. The Russia-Ukraine war has been fought with the most lethal and the most high-tech weapons so far. But for the last 17 long months, the decision on when to pull the trigger was always made by a human. And now, for the very first time, Russia claims to have used a fully automated air defense system powered by AI to have shot down a Ukrainian aircraft. According to the Russian state media, on the 24th of May, Russia deployed its S-350 Vityaz air defense system that had been tweaked to be directed by an artificial intelligence code to autonomously detect, track and destroy Ukrainian air targets. And all this without any human involvement and direction. Russia reportedly wants to use this to bring down Ukrainian drones that have given Kiev a certain edge on the battlefield. The S-350 Vityaz air defense system can be operated in both active and passive radar modes simultaneously. It can engage hostile aircraft, drones, ballistic and even cruise missiles with an impressive range of 150 kilometers. The Vityaz missiles can bring down projectiles that travel at speeds of over 2 kilometers per second. Despite these impressive capabilities, what has really concerned a lot of military strategists is the fact that AI has now been allowed complete autonomy in deciding when to pull the trigger. But weapons powered by AI aren't exactly new. Last October, Israel had made headlines for installing an AI-powered gun at the Al Arub Palestinian refugee camp. South Korea is said to have set up a similar contraption along its border with North Korea, while the United States had used AI-powered guns during its 2-decade-long wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And now with the use of AI-powered weapons in the Russia-Ukraine war, no one can be certain on how many lives will be lost because of a piece of software that is deciding to now pull the trigger. But what is certain though is that defense manufacturers are expecting some pretty big ticket orders worth billions of dollars in the next few months. The CEO of Rheinmetall, a German defense manufacturer, was candid enough to admit this.
We expect many orders to be placed in the coming weeks and months. Many billions of euros to be placed, also for Rheinmetall. We are on the right track. We are producing artillery shells almost at full capacity because the demand is there. The international demand is very high. And as said before, we will boost our production from 450,000 to 600,000 rounds next year. We expect to work at full capacity next year.
So the defense manufacturers who are working at full capacity this year also expect to work at full capacity next year. This must give you an indication of how long the Ukrainian counteroffensive is likely to drag on for. While defense manufacturers strike deals in air-conditioned offices, the soldiers on the battlefield are fighting a desperate war. As this body cam footage of a Ukrainian soldier will show you, on the battlefield, death lurks at every corner. The destruction of the Novokakhovka Dam has meant that the common people are suffering from an acute shortage of water. 72-year-old Helena from a frontline village in Ukraine describes her situation.
The situation is I wish I could use swear words. The situation is terrible. That's about it. We have 2 cubic meters of water in the garden container, maybe 1.5. If we use it sparingly, there are 4 of us. I really do not know.
Bakhmut, which before the war was a bustling city of over 70,000 people, has been reduced to an empty shell. But the fighting is still underway, and Ukraine is trying to claw its way back. Efforts by the Pope, Emmanuel Macron and China in the past have had no success in establishing peace. And now, a peace delegation of the African nations is trying to broker a settlement.
But we want to engage so that a peaceful solution is found. So we welcome President Zelensky's openness that there should be further engagements. And as African leaders, we stand ready and willing to have further engagements. Thank you very much.
Will there be a negotiated settlement? And what exactly will be the shape of this negotiated settlement is hard to predict. But what is certain though is that so long as Vladimir Putin and the leaders of the NATO military alliance refuse to reach middle ground and negotiate, more and more number of soldiers will be killed in ditches far from their homes. An 18-year-old Japanese soldier was detained on the 14th of June after he shot dead 2 instructors and also injured a third one at a training range in central Japan. The Wednesday morning incident was the first such fatal shooting at a ground self-defense force or the GSDF firing range since 1984 in Yamaguchi. In a country where gun ownership is tightly controlled, mass shootings are extremely rare. So what then explains the recent escalation in the number of violent crimes in Japan? Our next report gets you the details.
Japan was left stunned by a rare shooting incident this past week. An 18-year-old military recruit who joined in April this year shot at 3 training personnel, killing 2, and grievously wounding another in Japan's central Gifu prefecture. The cadet, whose identity is being withheld, fired a rifle at the victim with the intention to kill. Detained on the spot by other soldiers, the cadet has been charged with attempted murder. Any other detail about a possible motive is yet to be determined.
During a live-fire training for new members, one self-defense force member candidate fired a gun towards 3 officers. With regards to the situation of the 3 members that were shot, we confirmed 2 are dead and 1 is injured.
One of the deceased was a 52-year-old instructor, while the other 2 were both aged 25. All 3 victims were charged with training new recruits, including the attacker. As a preventative measure, all live fire and explosive training drills were suspended across the island nation. Local residents struggled to fathom such an unprecedented incident.
I am very surprised that such a thing could happen. We can't enter the facility, so I didn't know what happened, but I did think something probably had happened.
Anyone seeking to own a gun in Japan must go through a rigorous vetting process. Given the strict regulations, shootings are extremely rare in Japan, but several high-profile incidents have rattled the country over the past year. In July last year, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was shot dead on the campaign trail by a man who allegedly targeted him over his links with the Unification Church. In April this year, the current Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, escaped unhurt after a man threw an explosive device towards him at a campaign event. And last month, Japanese police detained a man after an hours-long knife and shooting rampage in which 4 people were killed, including 2 police officers. In the land of the rising sun, the sharp rise in violent acts is a worrying trend.
At least 9 people were shot dead in the northeastern Indian state of Manipur on the 13th of June. The late Tuesday night incident is the latest in the weeks of violence that have been sparked by the long-standing ethnic tensions. Reportedly, unidentified gunmen wielding sophisticated weaponry stormed Kamanlok village on the outskirts of the state capital, Imphal, and shot indiscriminately at the houses. A couple of days later, a federal Indian minister's home was also set ablaze by a mob. More than 100 people have so far lost their lives in these violent ethnic clashes, while more than tens of thousands have been forced to flee from their homes to seek safety. So what's happening in the state of Manipur? Our next report gets you the details.
The northeastern Indian state of Manipur has been rocked by violent ethnic clashes since the 3rd of May. Curfew has been imposed and internet services have been cut off in a bid to curtail widespread arson and anarchy. Thousands of homes have been burnt down and businesses vandalized. Tens of thousands have been evacuated from the violence-affected areas. Federal security force personnel have been deployed to bring the situation under control. Mobs running amok have raided police stations and stolen weapons as well. Gauging the urgency of the situation, shoot-at-sight orders were also issued. All these measures, though, have failed to protect lives of more than 100 people. As per estimates, more than 40,000 people have been uprooted from their homes. Violence flared up again on Tuesday night in the Kangpokpi district, with hours-long gun battle between the rival Kuki and Meitei communities, which resulted in the highest toll in a single incident in the fresh wave of violence to hit the state.
We have bring here 9 dead bodies and deposit at the Jennings morgue. Huh? There are 10 injured.
Barely 48 hours later, on Thursday evening, a 1,000-strong mob set fire to the residence of Union Minister of State for External Affairs, Dr. R.K. Ranjan Singh, around 10:45 p.m. local time. Defying the appeals of security personnel, the mob hurled homemade petrol bombs, torching the residence. Security forces, fire tenders and locals rushed to the spot to douse the flames.
With my own sweat, with prayer, I construct the house. But if someone is try to vandalize and demolish, I feel shocked. And I never expect such kind of attitudes and activities from my fellow citizens of the state. The law and order condition in the state of Manipur is totally failure. The existing government could not maintain this, despite the central government has sent a lot of the protections and rapid action force.
Tensions came to a head last month when tribal groups comprising mainly the ethnic Nagas and Kukis protested against demands by the majority Meitei community to be included under the government's scheduled tribe category. As per Indian law, members of such tribes are given reserved quotas for government jobs and college admissions. This quota system is a corrective measure of sorts to address structural inequality and discrimination spanning generations. The majority non-tribal Meitei community, which dominates the Imphal Valley, is perceived by the tribals to be encroaching upon the constitutionally defined privileged status of tribals. Interior Minister Amit Shah visited the strife-torn state bordering Myanmar last month, but the recent flare-up in violence points to a state that remains volatile and tense, albeit under control.
The fragile security situation in the Horn of Africa was shattered on the 9th of June. 6 civilians and 3 security personnel were killed in a 6-hour-long siege by the Islamist Al-Shabaab militants at a beachside hotel in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. Al-Qaeda's East Africa affiliate Al-Shabaab has been waging an insurgency for the last 15 years against the internationally backed federal government. Often, they target hotels that host the high-ranking Somali and the foreign nationals. Our next report gets you the details.
Pearl Beach Hotel is a popular spot at Lido Beach along Mogadishu's coastline. Down the street from Turkish embassy, the hotel is favored by Somali government officials. On Friday evening, though, as the Somalis were getting into the mood for weekend festivities, 7 militants stormed the hotel just before 8 p.m. local time. The assault was later claimed by the extremist group Al-Shabaab, which is notorious for carrying out attacks on hotels and other high-profile locations, and usually set off by a suicide bombing.
I was sitting near the beach when the first explosion happened at the front gate of the hotel, and there was another one at the back. I ran to a wall nearby and hid myself behind it, and Somali forces rescued me from there.
The 6-hour siege ended at around 2 a.m. when all 7 militants were killed in a fierce gunfight with security forces. In addition to the casualties, at least 20 people suffered injuries, though some estimated the wounded to be much higher. 84 people, including women, children, and elderly, were rescued by the security forces.
What occurred last night was quite tragic, as it occurred in an unexpected setting and at an unexpected time. The Amin paramedic staff had immediately rushed to the scene, and we collected 20 wounded patients from the scene, 4 of whom were ladies and 16 others were males, as well as the body of a soldier who was wearing battle fatigues. Those are the overall numbers of the people that we were able to collect from the scene. However, the number of casualties may actually be higher because there were other ambulances operating there as well as private vehicles who were able to collect victims of the attack. So there is a possibility that the casualties may become even higher.
As Somalia struggles to recover from decades of internal conflict and natural disasters, Al-Shabaab has proven to be a thorn in its side. Driven out of Somalia's main towns and cities by an African Union force, it still wields considerable clout over swaths of countryside. Last year, Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud launched an all-out war against Al-Shabaab. He had rallied Somalis to help flush them out, denouncing them as bedbugs. That pledge had come after 21 people were killed and 117 others wounded in a 30-hour Al-Shabaab siege at Mogadishu Hotel in August 2022. Barely 2 months later, in the country's deadliest attack in 5 years, 121 people were killed and 333 injured in twin car bombings, once again in Mogadishu. In recent months, though, the Somali army and militias, known as Masavisli, has recaptured swaths of territory in the center of the country. These operations have been backed by US airstrikes and the African Union mission ATMIS. In retaliation, Al-Shabaab killed 54 Ugandan peacekeepers last month in an attack on an African Union base in the southern town of Bulu Marir. And now this attack at Lido Beach underscores the menace of Al-Shabaab President Hassan is grappling with.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the Twitter handle that you see on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.